So this should be a pretty rich discussion. I'm looking forward to it. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and jump right into my short presentation as it pertains to the national CMM before and after results. Hopefully you guys can see this. Hopefully it's not too small. I'll just widen it for the presenters real quick. This is looking at the 6 dimensions covered during the workshop. The red indicates the initial CMM. The green indicates the results following the implementation or the reassessments that we have with the sites. As you can see, there's been some improvement in terms of the numbers and whatnot across the dimensions. One of the things that kind of stood out to me during the actual reassessments that was pretty much a common theme is that during the initial CMM, folks were still a little unclear as to what TSMO is. Once they went through the CMM and had a little time to let the dust or fog settle and had a better grasp on TSMO, and understood it, in certain dimensions, their numbers actually went down because now, with them having a better understanding. So if you're one of those sites where your actual numbers in one of the dimensions or a couple of the dimensions went down, that was a pretty common theme, being that folks now had a better grasp on what TSMO is. In terms of what came out of those implementation plans that you guys developed following the CMM workshops, this workshop is a part of what came out of that. This roundtable is a part of what came out of it. There were some trends that came out of those implementation plans or the development of them, and one of the highest sought after item or item identified to be pursued was the development of a TSMO program plan. And so that's a pretty hot topic in terms of TSMO development or advancement of TSMO, period. We had a tie for second in that we had, folks were looking at updating their ITS architectures as well as developing a business case for TSMO. The architecture, at the time the original CMMs were conducted, I think the average age for a ITS architecture was around 12 years old. The oldest was around 15. So this is just to give you a snapshot of what the trends are in terms of TSMO development or advancement. Currently, there's some products being developed in terms of how to develop a business case for TSMO. What we're finding is that, and this is also a representation of everything of the folks that are around the table, and that folks, DOTs and MPOs are doing business differently. So in terms of making the business case will definitely vary. In terms of making the business case to constituents, to senior leaders, to legislation, it all differs. It's all about how a particular agency is conducting their business. Okay? So these are the trends. I'm not going to go through each and every one of them, but just wanted to give you a snapshot of what came out of those workshops and what we actually found out as a result of our tracking. To further set the tone for the roundtable and other roundtables to come, as I mentioned, we have a very packed agenda. We have several topics. Some of them overlap, some of them don't. But we're going to try to give it our best shot to get through all of them. With that being said, if we do not get through all of them, there are going to be other roundtables. The vision here is to have these roundtables at least quarterly, within the next year, during the next year, 2018 and beyond, because we want to keep the momentum in terms of TSMO, and shifting the culture to one that is more operation-centric. We want to keep that going because this is the world we're living in. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump right into the lightning round for the folks around the roundtable. We're going to start with Marco Cameron from TxDOT and go in a clockwise position to have folks self-introduce them, or give themselves a self-introduction, as well as the status on their program plan development and or the status of where their overall TSMO program lies. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Marco to start the lightning round.
Okay, good morning. I'm Marco Cameron, and I've been with TxDOT for over 5 years, all with the Traffic Operations Division. Prior to joining TxDOT, I led product launches and oversaw quality assurance programs in automotive and electronics manufacturing industries. During my time here at TxDOT, I've mostly been involved with supporting the districts for developing plans, specifications, and estimates for road construction projects that include ITS. Since June of 2016, I have fulfilled the role of project manager for developing the statewide TSMO strategic plan. And that is included providing instruction on program planning to internal and external stakeholders around the state. So as I mentioned, we've been developing a statewide TSMO strategic plan since it kicked off in July of 2016. And that consisted of the TxDOT Traffic Operations Division initiating a work authorization with engineering consulting firm Atkins to develop a statewide TSMO strategic plan under an indefinite deliverable contract. Ongoing efforts are in progress to align the TSMO effort with related objectives laid out by TxDOT's administration and with other complementary efforts underway at TxDOT. That started off, we did some state-of-the-practice research, looking at what FHWA and AASHTO had to offer, looking at what other DOTs were doing in the area of TSMO. In phase 2, we facilitated a series of outreach events in various locations around the state to introduce the TSMO concept to the stakeholders, the TxDOT districts, and local partner agencies. In phase 3, which was started at the beginning of 2017, we compiled those CMM survey results and other input collected from the stakeholders. And using that, as well as the state-of-the-practice research findings, Atkins drafted the initial statewide TSMO strategic plan, and that was ultimately issued in August of this year by the division director of the Traffic Operations Division. Currently, we're in a phase where we're rolling out the strategic plan, providing instruction on it, and we're also transitioning into a phase where the TxDOT districts, there are 25 TxDOT districts, many of them rural, but as you know, Texas is a big state, so we have quite a few large metropolitan areas. But Austin District is the first of those 25 districts to kick off the development of their TSMO program plan. That started in August, and we expect to have that wrapped up at the end of April of 2018.
Okay. Thanks, Marco. Let's come around to Paul.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul Karafides. I'm with the Office of Transportation Operations Management at the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission. We're the MPO for the Philadelphia region. We're a bi-state agency covering both Pennsylvania and New Jersey. As the operations group here, we're involved in many TSMO activities, including 8 incident management task forces, along with regional traffic signal retiming programs for both Pennsylvania and New Jersey, amongst many other projects. We also collaborate on various projects with other groups within DVRPC, such as our smart growth, safety, and corridor planning groups. And we also work in conjunction with both our Pennsylvania and New Jersey state DOTs on a multitude of projects. One such TSMO project is the big undertaking of the I-76 corridor in the Philadelphia region, the Integrated Corridor Management Project that PennDOT is currently working on. DVRPC has been involved in many ways, including modeling work and first responder outreach for the project. We're also currently updating our 2009 operations master plan So hopefully within the next few months, several months, we'll have a new document that will be moving towards more of a regional TSMO plan to cover both Pennsylvania and New Jersey. And that's about it from us.
All right, thanks, Paul. Next up, we have Natalie.
Good afternoon. My name is Natalie Becker. I'm a Senior Program Manager with the North Central Texas Council of Governments. We're the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I've been with COG since May of 1999, so I've been here a while. I have worked in the areas of intelligent transportation systems since I started at COG, so I kind of grew up being integrated into the operations side. Our NPO oversees about 12 counties. We have over 209 different municipalities that we work with, and over 13 of them are 100,000 in population or more. So we have a lot of folks within our region that we have to coordinate when it comes to TSMO and operational type strategies. So from an NPO perspective, we kind of incorporate TSMO into multiple planning and programming activities that we do, one of which is our long-range transportation plan. Within that plan, we try to focus on TSMO type policies rather than specific projects, because it is looking out 25 years or longer, and we need to make sure that we're not limiting ourselves on what technology might be available at that time. So really our focus in our long-range plan is looking at TSMO type policies, and those include things like integration of traffic operations centers, implementing incident management policies, parking management, securing the infrastructure that we have that's critical infrastructure. From there, we move into our congestion management process, which really is kind of a midterm planning document that we use. And in that particular document, we analyze the roadways more specifically and identify what deficiencies are on those roadways, so then we can identify what strategies we can implement, TSMO strategies preferably, that we can implement to reduce or resolve the deficiencies on those roadways. From that document, we move into more of a short-range programming document. One thing that we have developed is the Ips Strategic Plan, and that identifies priority projects as it moves into our programming document, which we refer to as our Transportation Improvement Program. So one area to identify those projects is in our strategic plan. Another thing is, as projects come forward that maybe we didn't anticipate, we do have a TSMO criteria selection process that we go through to add projects, maybe new and innovative projects that might come up in between call for projects that we might have. And so we do have a criteria to analyze that. And we also require projects, obviously as others do, to have an architecture consistency statement within those projects before they receive federal funding. As we begin to move into the programming to implementation, we have to work well with multiple agencies. As I mentioned, we have over 209 different municipalities, and so it's very important that we have all our partners on board in order for our system to operate seamlessly and efficiently. So we really have to coordinate with those partners and make sure we get their buy-in when we identify and implement these TSMO type criteria. So that's kind of where we're at from the Dallas-Fort Worth perspective. I'll turn it back to Daniel.
Thanks, Natalie. Next up, we have Tracy Bramble from Iowa DOT.
Hi, this is Tracy Bramble. I also pulled in Donna Matulak, who is our TSMO coordinator. I'm with our Office of Strategic Communications, and I'm talking to you today because we are kind of at the point where we're starting to communicate TSMO out to our stakeholders and especially employees. We're in our third TSMO year. The strategic plan was completed 2 years ago. Then we have also implemented our program plan. We have one completed service layer plan out of the 8 that we have in the works. One important thing that we're doing at Iowa is implementing operational focus into everything we do, which is going to include maybe not calling anything TSMO past what needs to be called TSMO to be in a budgetary cycle. But as far as communicating and now implementing into our system, everything is going to be just the operations focus. Donna, you want to add anything?
Nope, I think you covered it.
Thanks. That's Iowa.
All right. Thanks, Tracy. Let's come down to Solomon.
Good afternoon, all, or most. My name is Solomon Cavanis, and I represent the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority. We are the MPO for Central and Northern New Jersey. We are a brother to DVRPC, who handles the Southern Delaware Valley region in New Jersey, also part of Pennsylvania. I am Special Projects Manager for Planning and Operations, and I'm also the Program Manager for TSMO within the MPO. I was brought on about 5 years ago to bring an operational field to the MPO into planning for strategic programming in the long term. About 2013, we initiated a project called the Connected Corridor, or branded as the Connected Corridor, which was the update of our ITS architecture in New Jersey statewide, and also a strategic deployment plan. That plan has incorporated the CMM process, and in coordination with New Jersey DOT and other agencies in New Jersey, it has been incorporated into the TSMO program. We are currently in the process of updating and advancing that as the business case for TSMO in New Jersey, and that project is currently being led or supported by WSP. We are looking at a June 2018 completion. We're coordinating among all the agencies in New Jersey, which include the state, local, and federal agencies that would also include many of the authorities that are located in New Jersey, which New Jersey, being a small state, has a number of political authorities. The TSMO program is an effort to stabilize and institutionalize TSMO within planning and programming, and we've had a number of changes due to political and staffing turnover. So this is an effort to make sure that we're all coordinating and also implementing TSMO within the TIP and the STIP in the state, and looking at our long-range plan. So we are moving forward with that, and I have a few questions and topics to discuss moving forward in this program. Thank you.
Thanks, Solomon. Let's move to Monica Harwood, Washington DOT.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you're at. I'm Monica Harwood with Washington State Department of Transportation. I think technically I'm called a statewide traffic operations engineer. Essentially, I'm a TSMO champion for the agency. I specifically work towards TSMO integration and workforce development. Here at WashDOT, our agency is well established in terms of the integration of ITS usage and traffic operations. Much like Marco talked about for Texas, we're a highly decentralized agency where planning, design, construction, and operations take place in one of our 6 regions, with headquarters providing kind of policy and overall program support. We have a mixture of a heavily congested urban region, the Puget Sound, where Seattle is, with a lot of rural areas. We are definitely shifting from kind of the old school ITS traffic operations to a bigger TSMO picture where we are including planning, design, and other divisions. I think that was best represented in the difference probably between our original CMM in 2014, where really we had to introduce the acronym of TSMO and what it was, to our reassessment this last fall. And much in line with what Daniel showed on the chart, our CMM numbers went down between our original and our reassessment. And I think what that showed for us is we're at a much higher level of maturity, knowing what we don't know and how big of a tackle it's going to be for us to take on some of those challenges. So despite a conscious effort to further integrate TSMO and educate people about TSMO, we've had some big challenges within our agency to move that needle in that direction. We have great efforts going on. With the integration into planning, we have a corridor approach effort that has taken place over the past year and a half. We have things in design like practical solutions that are going on, where it's making sure that we're considering the most efficient means to solving some of the issues on our roadways. We have concerted education about TSMO going on. But the challenge is all of these efforts, while they're great, they're happening independently with no common focus. And I say that in the fact that we have no statewide TSMO plan or even a statewide a statewide traffic operations plan. So where we are at is we have maintained individual funding programs such as like IRT, operations, ITS, or maybe low-cost enhancements. And those are all managed individually with no connection between them necessarily or how they fulfill the higher purpose of TSMO and the integration. And so you can imagine if that's not happening within our traffic operations division, we also aren't necessarily doing that with the other divisions like planning and design that are essential for full integration of TSMO and agency. And so we have come to the conclusion that we are going to be pursuing a statewide TSMO plan and certainly mass education at all levels, including our own traffic operations staff. And so I personally very much appreciate this phone call and the opportunity to hear our colleagues speak about their efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Let's move to Kofi Wahisi from the Atlanta Regional Commission. Kofi, are you on?
Yes, I'm here. Thanks, Daniel. We have 4 of us here in the room and happy to participate on the webinar. Just to give folks a quick overview of the Atlanta area, if you're not familiar with it, the Atlanta region comprises of approximately, well, exactly 20 counties, but some of those are just portions of those counties. 100 municipalities, roughly 5.2 million people as of 2015 and growing. Will be up to close to 8 million by the year 2040. We were ranked, I forgot the number, but the Atlanta region, or Georgia overall, is ranked one of the highest ranked states for increase of highway fatalities in the country. We have over 5,000 signalized intersections in that 20-county area that I mentioned. And moving on to, I guess, a little bit of history of ITS or ATMS in Georgia. There was a 1996 Olympics that sort of prompted a sort of heavy investment in ITS/ATMS TSMO infrastructure, leading to ATMS on freeways, including service patrols called HERO. Currently, the investment has been focused mostly in the Atlanta region on express lane implementation. And Atlanta is one of the major freight hubs in the southeast, if not the country. So we have a lot of freight and logistics contingency here. And then just to kind of list some of the planning efforts that have been done over the last few years, we have kind of like the previous presenter mentioned, a few sort of independent but statewide or region-wide planning studies or documents that were underway. We have the Strategic Regional Thoroughfare Plan, and I can get into, I guess, explaining all these documents maybe when the questions come up, but that was essentially an arterial management document that was related closely to the congestion management process requirement. We also did at that same time, we completed an ARC or a truck route master plan, which identified a truck route for the region. GDOT led Regional Traffic Operations Program, which consists of several corridors being prioritized and identified to carry out or implement arterial management with synchronized signals and real-time corridor management. We also have done the Metro Atlanta, we meaning GDOT in particular, led the Metro Atlanta Freeway Operational Planning Study, which led to a lot of recommendations that more or less were traffic flow improvements. They're geometric, but some of those improvements were also more operational and technology-based. And then finally, GDOT has also took the lead on the Managed Lanes Implementation Plan, which again has led to what I think is our current investment. Our portfolio of capital improvements for the highway system is primarily, our highway and freeway system is primarily contingent on express lane expansion in the Atlanta region. So with all those, I guess if you had done all of those studies all at once, all at the same time in some sort of cohesive fashion, that would constitute a pretty good TSMO plan or TSMO study for the region. However, since they're all done at different times with different priorities and different purposes, we're moving towards, in the Atlanta region, conducting a more comprehensive, I guess we call it a second iteration of TSMO studying for the Atlanta region, which we want to start early next year, if not by halfway through the next calendar year. So that's a quick overview of what's happening in the Atlanta area, Daniel. Be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Thanks, Kofi. What we're going to do, we're going to dive right into this, to the roundtable. And just to give you the lay of the land in terms of the round-robin format that we're going to follow, the first topic here is from Washington, which will be thrown on the table by Monica. And then we will go in a clockwise position around the table to have folks respond to it if it applies. So following Monica's topic, we will get a response from ARC. Monica, take it away.
So given that we're in the development of ours, I was just curious, whether agencies took on the development of the plan themselves. If they did, what did that look like, staffing-wise, as well as if they didn't, what consultants are out there? Did they find that there is a large qualified pool of consultants? Is it limited? The timeline for development, as well as, of course, cost for planning. Thank you.
We'll start with you, Kofi.
Yeah. Well, most of the consultants did all of those planning efforts that I mentioned, and some that I didn't mention, like the regional ITS architecture and the statewide ITS architecture and some of the concept of operations. Those were primarily done by consultants. And since there were so many of those, I don't have the budget in front of me for all those, but I would guess that the cost of that was probably in the low millions of dollars, maybe $1 to $2 million, if not more, just for consultant services. And then, and since GDOT led a lot of that work, there was a lot of in-house expertise that I guess was involved as well. The timelines, any of these planning studies or documents that I mentioned are usually like 12 to 18 month timetable. At least the ones that I had rattled off earlier, none of those I don't think went beyond 2 years that were more than 2 years in the making. And then we expect the upcoming regional TSMO study to essentially take us 18 months. Could be more. We're finalizing the RFP as we speak, and our budget for that is going to be somewhere around the $500,000 budget.
Okay. Thanks, Kofi. Let's get a response from Marco and TxDOT.
Sure. So I alluded to the process for our statewide strategic plan, and we did use a consultant. I mentioned we used Atkins for that particular effort. And as far as cost is concerned, well, it depends on the scope. And when we talk about TSMO program planning, you do an assessment of where you are as an agency, or in our case, districts, because we have several districts that will be to some extent leading their own TSMO program planning efforts. But we started off with a statewide TSMO strategic plan, which was essentially developed to provide statewide mission, vision, and goals for TSMO, and provide guidelines for the districts to develop their own detailed TSMO program plans. And because we wanted to keep the strategic plan high level, that obviously affected our scope, the level of detail we went into. And so the cost for our strategic plan, the fee, was just under $400,000 to develop that. And as we move forward with the TSMO program plans for the districts, it will vary based on the size of the district, the regional, the number of regional partners, and just the complexity of their traffic management system. But the Austin district is the first district to kick off the development of a TSMO program plan, and the fee for that was $400,000.
Okay. Thanks, Marco. How about Paul, folks down in the valley?
Sure. This is Paul Karafides. Again, as far as our operations plan, our 2009 plan was done in-house, and now our update to the regional TSMO plan, again, will also be done in-house by our operations staff, which is me and my two colleagues. So we'll be handling that, and the cost is kind of rolled into our staffing costs within our work program. We also do all the regional architecture in-house here, so that's again rolled into our staffing costs as part of our work program. And our timeline for our project, hopefully within the next 6 months to a year, we'll have our regional TSMO plan complete. And again, everything's going to be done in-house, and that's where our program plan stands as of now.
Thanks, Paul. Let's get a response from Natalie in North Central Texas.
Yeah, so our TSMO planning and programming is actually incorporated into our existing planning and programming documents, and all of those documents are completed by staff. Now, when we do specific plans like our Ips Strategic Plan, and we updated our architecture in 2014, those we did contract consultants out to do, and both of those ranged at about $85,000 each to do that particular work. And so sometimes we do things in-house, but those two particular documents we hired consultants to do, and it was about $85,000.
Thanks, Natalie. Let's get a response from Tracy, Iowa DOT.
Okay. Our plan originally was done both in-house and with consultants. Gannett Fleming and Pat Noyes helped out with those. We found about 10 to 20 different firms around the country that could help, but the FHWA's primer on TSMO program planning was super helpful at figuring out where we wanted to go. It took us about a month to finish up the strategic plan and the program plan.
A year.
Or a year, sorry, a month. That would be really quick. No, it took us a year to do the TSMO plan, the strategic statewide plan, and the program plan. And we used SHARP 2 grant to cover the cost, which was about $165,000 for the program plan. That included a lot of time for district and stakeholder outreach to get all of that wrapped into one statewide plan. So that's Iowa.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Tracy. Solomon, let's get a response from Jersey.
Oh, you didn't lose me. So we initiated our plan as an update to the ITS architecture as well as strategic deployment plan to try to update the programs around the state. That took about 18 months, and we budgeted $350,000. We had a number of firms submit for the contract, and we got about 6 in, so we had a nice pool. As we advance the project, we have about 5 firms who submitted, and we budgeted $300,000 for advancement, and it's another 18-month program, and it's going pretty smoothly.
Okay. Thanks, Solomon. I actually have a question that I want to throw in the back end of this. I heard where Kofi mentioned, the DOT, Georgia DOT, as them being an MPO within the Atlanta region and working with the DOT to develop the plans. I guess I'm curious to know whether or not any of the other roundtable members, as you were developing your plan, did you put together somewhat of a core team to develop the plan with internal and external partners, or was it something that you just did within your agency? Let's start with Marco from Texas, TxDOT.
So that's a very good question. In a sense, we did that with our outreach events. Part of our TSMO strategic plan development included going out to the districts and essentially running a workshop first to introduce some of the district personnel and their partners to TSMO. They all had some varying levels of understanding, and to conduct a CMM. But the TSMO initiative in itself, at least a statewide effort that we just wrapped up, and by the way, it took us a little over a year to develop a strategic plan. That was led out of the traffic operations division, traffic management section, and so we took the leadership role, and we just counted on input from the districts to guide the content of the strategic plan.
Okay.
So I hope I answered that question adequately.
Yes. Yes. Thanks, Marco. Paul, let's get a response from you guys.
Sure. Sure. With our plan, we work with all our stakeholders, the DOTs, the transportation agencies, to get their input on where and what they would like to see within the plan. We also have a transportation operations task force that meets quarterly. We reached out to them and used them as a sounding board for various items in the plan. So we work closely with all our stakeholders during the entire process.
All right. Thanks, Paul. How about you, Natalie?
We're very similar to how Paul had explained. We do bring on our external partners mainly because COGS, we don't operate anything on the system, so we have to get buy-in from our partner agencies. Again, the Department of Transportation, cities, toll operators, transit operators. We have to get all of their input and build consensus around what our objectives are and what our strategies are in order to make the system operate, because we don't operate it.
All right. Thanks, Natalie. Tracy?
In Iowa, we are just getting our internal ducks in a row first. We have a 20-member steering committee that has been operating for about 3 years now, and we thought it was really important to get the foundation in place. And now we're to the point when we're to the tactical movement in our TSMO program where we will start reaching out more to the cities, counties, MPOs. But our initial audience and our initial outreach is going to be internally to make sure all of our employees can understand that we're switching to an operations focus and what that means.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Tracy. Solomon, how about you guys in Jersey?
So in New Jersey, we have an architecture committee made up of the agencies, and those agencies all participated on the selection of the consultant, and they have been involved in the process from the beginning. So it's ongoing with all of our partners, DOT, the authorities, and locals.
All right. Thanks, Solomon. Monica, that was your topic. I didn't mean to hijack it, but did you get everything that you needed, or did you?
I did. That was perfect. Thank you.
All righty. Let's see. All right, the next topic will come from Tracy, Iowa DOT.
And as I mentioned a couple times, we are really trying to shift our focus within the DOT from construction to operations and having every step of the process have an operations focus. And we're trying to do that by changing the culture. And one of the things we're going to try to do is not even use the word TSMO. We're just going to try and get everyone on the same page as considering operations as a part of what they do. So we're wondering if other states are thinking about how to get internally your folks into a mindset shift from that construction focus to an operations focus.
Okay. Thanks, Tracy. Going in a clockwise position, let's get a response from Solomon. Solomon, you may be on mute. All right. Let's see. Monica, would this apply to Washington DOT?
Well, I think it does. I'm not sure we have had the specific conversation of changing construction to operations focus, but we're doing that, you know, at every level of project development. So whether it's planning, scoping, project or program management, design, construction, and then of course operations. And that has been where it's been difficult for us because we're decentralized. There's just that many more people we have to bring up to speed. And Tracy, your comment about getting your own ducks in a row resonated with me because what we found as we were trying to work with other divisions to up that education, what we found was our own staff within traffic operations, we thought understood what TSMO was, but really it wasn't. And so we have kind of rallied back to look just at our own division and make sure that we, like if somebody asked what is TSMO and what does it mean to our agency, to anyone, either headquarters or region at any level, that they would get essentially the same answer. And so that's our current focus, and we've kind of, we're trying to make sure that we have that solid understanding within what we would call people that report to our traffic operations organizations.
Okay, thanks, Monica. New Jersey is having some technical difficulties, so we're going to just keep moving along, and Solomon will chime in when he can. Let's go to ARC.
Yeah, most of the I guess short-term investment in our highway system is going to be primarily focused on managed lane expansion, as I mentioned earlier. It's going to be roughly about, the numbers are constantly evolving as far as the cost, but I mean almost like a third of the investment of our long-range plan, which is going to be upward a little over $20 billion, is currently programmed for express lanes, for general purpose vehicles, but also for trucks or commercial vehicles in just the Atlanta region in particular. So whether or not you call that a shift from construction to operational thinking might be up for debate, but essentially the state has gotten to the conclusion, and the MPO has as well, that any expansion of a freeway is going to be managed and therefore would be, I know, somewhat considered TSMO. But on the local level, the projects that kind of fly under the radar, I do think there is an opportunity for Atlanta region as a whole to increase the level of spending and focus on managing traffic and transportation better than expanding capacity. But like I said, I think the TSMO, regional TSMO plan should help, will help with corralling and creating more of a consensus at the local level on focusing more investment on operational improvements. Some local governments are doing very well. I will say some of the larger, more populated local governments in the Atlanta region, but some of the smaller bedroom community types or rural community types that don't have much in the name of activity centers, I still think there's opportunity there.
All right. Thanks, Kofi. Marco, let's get a response for tech.
Okay, so in terms of changing from construction culture to more operations-centric culture, I think we've definitely made some significant progress at TxDOT in that area, and it's really helped the efforts related to developing TSMO strategic plans and our future program plans. There was an initiative we had over the course of a couple of years, from starting in 2015 and went through 2017. It was called our Traffic Management System Initiative. What Traffic Management Systems, or TMS, is something that includes ITS and signals. The idea that they both go hand in hand, and it was an initiative that was conducted over 2 years, as I mentioned, and TxDOT administration sponsored some research on the state of the practice of TMS, both internally and industry-wide. And the research provided a compelling case for the return on investment in traffic management systems. And through that, some areas of support were identified that were needed, that the district stated that they needed. And applying that research and momentum from the TMS initiative, a higher priority from TxDOT leadership was placed on developing processes and policies to encourage districts to prioritize funding toward TMS. And some more specific things that were done to systematically embed district-level ownership in traffic management and to promote funding decisions at the district level. There were 3 actions that were carried out. There were 2 policy memos that were issued by the chief engineer, Bill Hill, with TxDOT to communicate expectations and goals for traffic management from leadership that leadership had on the districts. And then we've, as a traffic operations division, we've led collaborative meetings, quarterly statewide ITS leadership meetings among the districts. And by the way, the districts were asked to identify TSMO champions and TSMO coordinators. They're informal positions. They're not official agency titles, but essentially those will be people that would lead the efforts of TSMO in the district and collaborate on the statewide level. There also was some metrics, leadership metrics related to TSMO that were put in place earlier this year. Travel time reliability, incident clearance time, and asset uptime. And we started that with the 5 metro districts and El Paso. And those 5 metro districts are Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, San Antonio, and as I said, El Paso. And those metrics will be rolled out to the urban and rural districts probably in a year or so. So those are some of the things that we've done to try to streamline operations. And I think there'll be more things to come as we move forward over the next year or so.
Thanks, Marco. Let's get a response from Paul at Delaware Valley.
Sure. Being an MPO, we have a little bit of a different focus since we aren't really in the construction business. Here, we do have an operations group, but I think our biggest thing here, being a planning organization, the ideas of TSMO aren't foreign to the planning community. It's just kind of calling that name now. So I think we've done a better job of collaborating internally with the various other offices here, such as the CMP, the Long Range Plan, our capital programs, Bike Ped Transit, all those different groups have kind of come together, and now when a new project comes through, we all take a look at the project, input our ideas into it, so it's not these bearing, desperate projects that kind of get a little bits and pieces all the time. This way we can all take a look at it and all put our 2 cents in so the projects flow right from the beginning. We're also part of New Jersey DOT's Complete Team, which is a group of that includes transportation operations, transportation planning, capital programs, and maintenance. They meet quarterly, and again, they go through projects and kind of make sure everything is incorporated from the start instead of piecemeal at the back end of projects. So that's what we have here at DBRPC.
All right. Thanks, Paul. Let's get a response from Natalie.
So from the North Central Texas Council of Governments perspective, one thing that has worked for us is, as I mentioned earlier, is we've tried to incorporate TSMO into our existing planning documents. So our Long Range Transportation Plan, our CMP, as well as our Transportation Improvement Program, all of those documents incorporate it into a component of it, so that way it's part of the overall planning and programming process and culture within our organization. Now, we haven't always called it TSMO, as you alluded to as your question, how are you communicating TSMO and explaining that to outside agencies. And really what we've always focused on is explaining it as what strategies can we implement to better operate the transportation system we have, whether it's reducing the demand on the system or better operating the system that exists out there today. And so that's really the focus and the message that we try to send, and if you want to call it TSMO or something else, it's just how do we better operate our system.
Thanks, Natalie. Tracy, did you get everything that you needed, or do you need someone to elaborate?
No, that was great. Thank you.
All right. The next topic will come from, we have to skip down to Delaware Valley. New Jersey is still having technical difficulties, so let's go with you, Paul.
All right, sure. So my questions are more towards the numbers portion of the varying plans. So kind of when setting goals, I have the goal to improve travel time reliability. Well, what's an improvement? 1%, 5%, 10%. How did you get that number? And then on the back end, how did you evaluate that your strategies helped to bring about that goal? And also for performance measures, how and where did you start with performance measures? That's our big question here. And then for my third question is, this is probably on everyone's plate, is how is CV and AV technology being incorporated into TSMO plans?
Let's start with Natalie.
Okay, so from kind of a goal-setting perspective, we do set goals similar to, as you have mentioned, improve travel time reliability. Those are kind of the general goals within our long-range transportation plan. And then as we move into project implementation, specifically if it's newer types of strategies, we usually try to do some type of before and after assessment of those projects as they're implemented. So if it's a strategy we've been doing for years, we have data that quantifies the benefit of those types of strategies. But if it's something new that we haven't tried before, we recently did like a peak period shoulder lane on a corridor. And so we looked at speeds along that corridor, we looked at safety elements, travel time, throughput, things to that sort. We did an actual before and after study to quantify those benefits so we know, are those projects in the future going to provide us with a benefit that we would like to see. And then as projects move into our TIP, so before they're actually implemented, we do try to do some qualitative assessment of those projects from a mobility and an air quality standpoint. We use congestion mitigation air quality funds for many of our TSMO type strategies. So in order to utilize those funds, we have to estimate an air quality benefit for those. And most of it's based on our past experience, and sometimes we have to forecast it out based on what we anticipate to observe from an operational perspective as part of those projects. Let's see. Your other question was incorporating CV and AV technology into TSMO plans. Currently we just touch on this. We don't go into a lot of detail in the plans that we have. But I do think a critical component of this is the data and the data sharing between the AV and CV technology, and how do we incorporate that into our operation systems so we can better operate, again, these systems that we have, and we can integrate this data. It's another data source that allows us to know what to expect in terms of folks that might be approaching different types of facilities and how to best manage them when they're on those facilities.
All right, thanks, Natalie. Let's move to Tracy, Iowa DOT.
Okay, as far as goals, that's one of the reasons that we have the 3 levels of TSMO planning. At our highest level, strategic planning, we didn't set numeric goals. We needed to state what we're going to do strategically statewide. The second level, our TSMO program plan, was much more detailed into how we intended to plug TSMO into the agency. It focused on business processes needed to propel TSMO forward, and also listed the basic performance measures we wanted to capture. There were 5 measures to start with. And then finally, the third level is our tactical level of documentation. It's composed of 8 service layers, and each of those service layers has a mini plan being created right now. It's the service layer plans that contain the more detailed and quantitative goals, such as clearance times, targets for quick clearance, and structured tiered approach that has been effective to TSMO within Iowa. So that's how we're doing the goals. And as far as performance measures, the big thing is just to do some. Numeric targets were based on the data we have available. Often the data comes from the ATMS system in our traffic management center. Like for the quick clearance targets, we only had 2 years of good ATMS data, so that's what we use to set targets. It's not perfect, but we can adjust it as we go. And we thought it was important not to be paralyzed by the perceived lack of data. Just go what you have and start there. And as far as CVAV, I'm going to let Donna talk to that.
For the CVAV, that is actually one of our service layers that we are going to start, or we will be starting it within the next month or so to kind of talk about where our agency is going with that. But I would fully agree with what Natalie just said regarding the data side of it. That is our focus, is providing all of the data that we have and making sure it's in a format and a usable to the auto industry as they move forward with autonomous vehicles. We want to just make sure we're in a position to be able to provide as much as we can and in a usable format for them.
Okay, thank you, Iowa. Let's come down to Monica Washtide.
Yes, so in terms of goal setting, we do not actively set quantitative goals for our projects. We do before and after studies on specific projects, particularly if they're high profile or pilot application. We do a lot of reporting. In fact, we're well known for our gray notebook and our corridor capacity reporting, and that is a great source of performance reporting. However, it lacks a couple different things. One, an iterative loop back to decision making. It's really focused on reporting and not necessarily providing numbers that we make decisions on. And second of all, it's really a bigger picture one. It's not a day-to-day operations like if we're operating the system, how do we make changes based on those performance metrics? So two things that I think that we are working on. One, in our planning stages, we have been working towards developing a performance framework, which would allow in the planning stage our agency, along with all of the partners that are involved in a corridor, to look at what are the goals that they would like to set for a corridor in terms of mobility. And those could be things like person throughput if it's a highly congested area, or more like reliability if it's a suburban or rural area where reliability can still be influenced. The second thing is working towards getting more specific data, because you really do need specific data for day-to-day operational decisions. So those are two efforts. We do not have anything incorporated for CVAV technology. We're still at a pilot program implementation of that technology.
Thanks, Monica. Let's get a response from ARC.
Yeah, from an MPO's perspective, or a regional one, we used to have a travel time index goal back in the day, and it was thought that a regional goal was inappropriate for one thing, and the goal itself, which was, I think it was 1.35 PTI, was unrealistic. And so then we kind of moved away, and I think through more specific, detailed efforts like in concepts of operations and other initiatives like corridor studies, the goals became more operational specific for travel time reliability, throughput, or traffic, or safety reduction, or safety improvement. So we do have quantitative goals, but they are all corridor, or I would say initiative dependent. We also have qualitative goals as well, but most of those are at a higher level, like from a regional perspective, or maybe like a sub-area perspective, as some of the other callers have mentioned. And then as far as when we started those, we've always like I said, we've always looked at performance measures, but we didn't come to the conclusion that they were inappropriate at the regional level until, I guess, over the last several years, maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, we started branching out into more specific performance measures. We also look at performance measures at the TIP project level. We've just started a new process where we evaluate all TSMO-related projects and capacity projects, as well as all other project types, by some kind of performance metric, if not several performance metrics. And for TSMO projects, we look at vehicle delay reduction, and we also look at travel time reliability for those types of projects, and we evaluate those projects based on inputs from the local project sponsors, including things like AADT, for example, and in some cases we are estimating emissions reductions as well, since we're a non-attainment area for ozone. And then as it relates to CAV, I think we're kind of just warming up to that from a regional perspective, and as I mentioned earlier, we will initiate a regional TSMO study here soon, and we will definitely be incorporating CAV. And I think the central discussion or exploration of CAV in the TSMO plan will mostly be centered around the availability of data, assuming that the detection is adequate. How do we disseminate real-time or pseudo-real-time data to and from all the consumers that are out there, vendors and consumers, and how is it best to organize and store that data and present it, for performance dashboarding and other purposes.
Okay. Thanks, Kofi. Real quickly, before Marco responds, if you guys would look up in the upper right-hand corner where we have a questions pod, for the folks that are on the phone, the audience, if you have any questions, by all means, place your questions in that pod so that we can, at some point towards the end, address your questions, okay? Again, it's in the upper right-hand corner near Tracy Bramble's picture. Please place your questions into that pod. All right. Marco, you're up.
Okay. So just to in order to stay brief, I will refer to Tracy's response with Iowa DOT because here in Texas we follow a framework very similar to the way Iowa is developing their TSMO program. In our strategic plan, our goals are for the most part qualitative, except we do define time frames for certain things to get done, and connected and autonomous vehicle technology is one of those things. We don't have any quantitative goals in place, but we did address or touch on that particular issue, and stating that we should have some sort of plan or policy in place as far as integrating that technology or considering it in some of our practices. And in some of those, we've defined 1 to 2 years for things like that. Monitoring performance regularly, that is something that is a very high priority topic at TxDOT. But when it comes to the quantitative measures of performance, that will be more defined in some of our district level TSMO program plans. I think I covered most of that question to the best that I could.
Okay. Thanks, Marco. Paul, did you get everything that you needed?
I did. That was great. Thank you all for your great answers.
All right. We are actually at the point where we should be taking some questions right now. But being that I don't see any in the question pod, we're going to press on, all right? So let's see. The next topic will come from Tracy in Iowa DOT.
We covered my topic, Daniel.
Okay. Let's go. Well, Delaware Valley.
We're at Texas, aren't we? We just answered the Delaware Valley questions.
Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one. I'm sorry. Texas, Marco, my bad. Let's go with your topic.
Okay, yeah, so TxDOT, as I mentioned earlier, we're a decentralized state. We have 25 districts. Some of our districts have large metropolitan areas. Then many of our districts are rural and don't have aren't highly populated. So as we conduct our outreach for TSMO and developing our TSMO strategic plan and providing instruction on TSMO, it's common that the rural regions don't always see a compelling business case for TSMO program planning, and that's due to congestion not being a prevalent issue, because TSMO seems to be, from the perspective of many, as something that should be done in an area that has congestion. So what I wanted to gather from the panel, particularly for states that have developed TSMO program plans that apply to rural regions, what is the scope of TSMO program planning in those regions? What are some of the areas that you address, and what is the guidance you offer those regions as far as how they should go about putting a plan in place?
Let's move to Paul for a response if applicable.
All right. I don't really have a response. I wish congestion wasn't a problem in our area, but we're pretty much a metropolitan area here in the Philadelphia region. So the rural subject isn't quite fitting for DVRPC.
Right. Natalie, if applicable, do you have a response?
I'll give a quick response. Most of our region is metropolitan, but we do have rural areas. I would foresee things like incident management would be relevant in rural areas because usually in the rural areas, maybe you don't have frontage roads or alternate routes for folks to get off the freeway and reroute, or if they do, it's a longer detour than you would like for them to have to take. So I definitely would think incident management would be something of a focus in rural areas that maybe you could help encourage folks to participate in TSMO activities.
Thanks, Natalie. Let's get a response from Iowa.
Well, if you've ever been up here, you'll know we are mostly a rural state, and 72% of our congestion is non-recurring. So it is weather-related, it is incidents, things like that. And just as Natalie said, incident management is huge. We have two major interstates running through the state, I-80 east and west and I-35 north and south. So developing incident management plans and detour plans, emergency plans for those interstate routes in the rural areas really got some buy-in from our rural folks who don't see a lot of congestion. EMS training is also huge because a lot of those rural areas are can be a distance from a trauma center. Getting the ITS information out there and programs that get the information back to hospitals quicker from crashes and get incidents cleared more quickly. We're really pushing the life-saving and cutting the response time as benefits of an adequate operations focus, even in the rural areas.
Yeah, and we're really trying to push the Sharp 2 TIM training to all of our rural areas, get as many of those people on board as we can, get the training out there, and like Tracy said, we're just trying to figure out how to clear those incidents quicker out in those rural areas, because that can be a challenge when it could take an hour for responders to reach an area.
That's it, Brett, for that one.
All right, thank you. Let's get a response from Monica.
Sure. I think in terms of mobility, Tracy and Natalie's responses about incident management, I would concur with that. But I would also add weather information. We use RWIZ and traveler information to our rural areas to inform travelers of conditions and to encourage them to avoid trips if it's not necessary. And so that's on the mobility side. And one aspect besides just our normal travelers or commuters, I think emphasizing for the freight industry in rural areas is really important. So the economic development part speaks to the mobility. But on the flip side, we always have to remember that TSMO strategies not only influence mobility, but they influence safety. And so the reduction of collisions through any of the TSMO strategies is important. And so we have really focused on the safety messaging in our rural areas. We have a field assessment program which looks at low-cost solutions to our rural roads. We go through and systematically review our corridors, all of them within a 3 to 4 year window, and are looking for small operational changes that we can make to improve safety in those corridors.
Thanks, Monica. ARC, if this applies.
Yeah, not to speak for GDOT on this, but a little bit of the things that I know are similar to what some of the other presenters have mentioned, like corridor-specific applications in a rural area, like for, in our case, coastal hurricane evacuation from the Atlantic coast into Atlanta. There's a corridor I-16 that is, I think GDOT's very interested in maintaining some level of TSMO programming, and the entirety of that corridor is rural, basically from Savannah to Macon, which is central part of Georgia, and it joins with I-75. And I-75 as well is a heavily traveled corridor as it relates to external traffic, out-of-state traffic getting in and out of Florida. They've got an interest there as well with the managed lane deployment already there, and then some other features like ramp metering on that corridor. And then we have a couple other corridors that are heavily monitored for weather or fog, heavy fog, one of them being I-75 as well. So I think I would say that for state of Georgia, it's corridor or interstate specific. And the programming and planning and programming is customary to whatever the specific circumstances are for that corridor. And then one other thing I would say is that as far as rural programming, it's not TSMO per se, but Georgia DOT is now focusing on connecting urban areas through fiber optics. So they're probably looking at the deployment of a fiber optic connection between metro area TCCs like Atlanta to Macon, Macon to Savannah, et cetera. So to help with some of the regional traffic or cross-jurisdictional traffic issues.
Thanks, Kofi. Again, for the folks in the audience, if you have any questions or comments, by all means, please place them in the questions pod in the upper right-hand corner. All right. The next topic will come from ARC.
Yeah, we are having probably a little bit of a difficulty trying to figure out how we can accomplish two things all at once next year. One being the update of our regional ITS architecture, which obviously is a federal requirement, and then carrying out this second iteration of TSMO planning for the region. And we're wondering, either at the state level or regional level, how do these two documents or planning activities, exercises relate? How have you handled the two? And then similar to that question, I mentioned earlier, I referenced the use of big data, developing a data exchange, getting prepared and anticipating the proliferation of connected and autonomous vehicles in the next few years. How are the TSMO plan and ITS architecture specifically handling the use of big data? Those are, I guess, our two main questions. We have others, but it would be nice, maybe, Daniel, if we could just focus on those.
Okay. Let's start with a response from TxDOT.
Yes, so as far as TSMO plans and ITS architecture, so as I mentioned previously, we started off with our statewide strategic plan. It's a high-level document. Our program planning will focus more on the districts, which thus will will relate to ITS architectures. That's when we'll get into that level of detail. But as someone mentioned, I think it might have been Daniel earlier in the conversation, that many regions, their ITS architectures haven't been updated for quite some time. So as part of our TSMO effort in terms of rolling out program plans in the districts and regions, the ITS architecture is thought to be a critical element of that. And so the details of how we're going to do that are still being developed in terms of how the two will relate. But we do plan to address ITS architecture, particularly in when I mentioned the rural regions of Texas. We see this as our TSMO effort as an opportunity to address ITS architecture. In terms of deliverables of a TSMO plan, in the program plan, what we want to do is we want to ultimately be able to identify projects for the region that will help them to achieve the goals that are set out in terms of the travel time, reliability, asset uptime, asset management. These are some of the things that TxDOT administration has placed a priority on. So in a TSMO program plan, the goal is to establish some projects and actions that will lead us into accomplishing some of those goals. As far as big data is concerned, we are, again, those things will be further defined in the TSMO program plans at the district and regional level. But from a statewide level, we are looking at ways of integrating INRIX data with our traffic management system software. We are using data visualization tools such as Tableau to provide some sort of analysis techniques for some of our those dashboard metrics that I mentioned earlier. Those being the ones that TxDOT administration has defined: asset uptime, instant clearance, and level travel time reliability. So that's where we are as far as Texas. Those are very important topics, and those are things that we have on our radar, and we'll have I guess more clarity on how those things how we will implement those things here in the near future.
All right, thanks, Marco. Let's get a response from Delaware Valley.
Sure. Here we do all the ITS architecture in-house. So through the various service packages we've used in the past, they kind of help to mold some of the strategies we've used in the region. And with the TSMO plan, we want to keep those strategies consistent. And all of this feeds into our long-range plan. So really, I think it's that consistency between your TSMO plan, your architecture, your long-range plan, keeping everything in line, making sure everything it's flowing the same way. As far as big data, we're kind of just touching on it here. We understand the need for data warehousing. On our end, most of the data comes from third parties. We really don't have much data that we ourselves gather other than from third-party vendors. So really it's how do we collect all that data and then integrate it into usable formats for all our varying agencies and how they can all best use that data. So we're really just at the infancy on our end for that big data. It's a difficult realm, and we're just starting to navigate it. So that's where we are.
All right, thanks, Paul. Let's get a response from Natalie. One other thing, once we get done with this particular question, we're going to move to the chat pod. We actually do have questions in the chat pod. So, once we make this round, we're going to jump to the questions in the chat pod. Natalie.
And I'll be very, very brief. Ours is similar to how Paul described the architecture linking into projects that then feed into our transportation improvement program, and then also how the projects that are identified in our ITS strategic plan feed into the transportation improvement program, as well as feed back into the architecture if the architecture has to be updated based on the types of projects that we're moving forward with. In terms of big data, we're kind of at the very beginning stages of looking into this as well. We are getting data from here. We're integrating with Waze through our 511 DFW. We also have some cities that are integrating their traffic signal data into the cloud, in which vehicles that are capable of getting traffic signal data are able to see that within the vehicle. So we do have some pilot projects that are being implemented around our region that deal with the traffic signal data side of items. But again, we're trying to look at how we collect that data, how do we use it for operational purposes in real time, and then also how do we use the archive data to help with the planning activities we do on the back end from our regional travel model and estimating the benefits of these different strategies that are implemented.
Thanks, Natalie. Let's get a response from Iowa.
This is Donna. From Iowa's perspective, we are about 95% complete with our ITS service layer plan, which basically identifies what we currently have on our existing system, as well as what our plan is going forward with all of that infrastructure, all of the equipment that we have out there, and what our long-range strategy is for maintaining, adding, holding some of our fleet steady. We are kind of looking at holding, like, our DMS boards, kind of that fleet steady right now, and a lot of that has to do with funding, but also with the future of autonomous vehicles, not knowing exactly what may or may not be needed in the future related to that. As far as big data, we use third-party data, but we also collect a huge amount of data within our own agency, and we have several initiatives going on right now trying to figure out, compiling all of that data, making that data available to any external partners that we have, putting it in a usable format for anybody to use. So that's been an ongoing project for probably about 2 years now, and part of that rolls into our AV project with how can we get that data available and have it ingestible into autonomous vehicles going forward.
Thanks. Thanks, Iowa. Let's move to Watchdog.
I think we'll just pass on this one. Thanks.
Oh, okay. Kofi, did you get what you needed, or do you need someone to elaborate on anything?
Yeah, and yeah, for the sake of time, I'll wait till the next roundtable to kind of get into more detail. But I did get some good answers.
Thanks, Kofi. All right, so I didn't notice the question in the chat pod before, but I see them now. So we're going to go ahead and maximize the question pod, and we're going to start with the first question from Marty, and that question is: Do you have anything in your plans to recruit and fulfill operation positions? Do you identify career paths? Do you define knowledge, skills, and abilities required? Let's start with Natalie.
Within our plans, we do not have anything in there that deals with recruitment or job descriptions or anything like that. It focuses on strategies alone.
All right. Thanks, Natalie. Let's go to Iowa.
This is Donna again. The only position that was really identified specifically is the position that I hold, which is the TSMO program manager position. Other than that, we are not identifying or creating any new positions. We're just kind of using what we have and spreading it across the entire state and try to get people involved and engaged on different aspects so that we don't have to create, we're trying not to create a office of TSMO. We want to spread that out throughout the agency. So
yeah, this is Tracy. We're trying to do that culture shift, and by identifying someone as TSMO, it gives it that flavor of the month feel that if we ignore it long enough, it'll go away. And so we don't want to do that. So we're trying to integrate functions and look at tasks rather than looking at positions.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's go to text.marco.
We don't go into any great detail in terms of positions and specific job qualifications. We do touch on training and how we would like the division to lead some of those efforts around the state. In terms of, it's not addressed in the strategic plan, but the Traffic Operations Division will be hiring a statewide traffic incident management coordinator to work with the districts to develop and improve upon traffic incident management procedures. So that's about all I have on that one.
All right, thanks, Marco. Paul, do you guys have a response?
Sure. Much like Natalie, we don't have anything in our plan for any positions or recruitment or anything like that. And most of it is just goals and strategies and those types of things.
All right, thanks, Paul. ARC.
Yep, we are sort of evolving a little bit, and since we don't operate much, we do use traffic engineering expertise to help evaluate TIP projects, like I mentioned earlier. But one thing I think we're migrating towards is looking at folks that have more computer backgrounds to help us handle synthesizing and distributing big data. So data scientist type folks is something that we're looking at to help answer TSMO-related questions and be more responsive to those a lot sooner.
Okay. Let's see. Monica, would this apply to you guys? Because I know you guys are fairly at the fairly beginning stages of getting your plan started.
Yeah, and we don't have any independent of a statewide plan going on addressing this either.
Okay. All right, before I dive into the next question from the chat pod, just wanted to ask the center, are we absolutely at the end of this, or can we take at least one more question from the chat pod?
I think it's better if we wrap up since we're already 4 minutes over time.
Okay. We, as you can probably tell, just scratched the surface, and we haven't even scratched the surface as far as the TSMO topics for this particular virtual roundtable is concerned. I've actually sent out an email to the presenters to see whether or not they would be interested in a part 2. If so, please respond. I've already gotten a response from 3 presenters already, or roundtable members. So needless to say, we want to continue this discussion. Hopefully we can do it the latter part of next month, once we get past the holidays and everything. I want to thank everyone for calling in today and taking the time out to sit in on the roundtable and participate. Here's my information here in terms of getting in contact with me. And if you have any questions, I will actually, we should be able to email these questions to the presenters that are in the chat pod, and hopefully we can get you guys to provide a response that we can send out to the audience via email. But before I wrap, I want to thank the center, Steve, Nilu, and Adam from the center, Pat Zielinski from AASHTO, and Brad Freeze from Tennessee DOT. These folks were on the coordinating committee to put this together, so I wanted to make sure that I gave a shout out to them. And also, again, here's my information in terms of contacting me if you have any questions. And with that being said, like I said, I appreciate it. I knew we would have a pretty rich discussion as we go through this. I look forward to continuing the TSMO discussion in terms of shifting in culture to one that is more operation-centric in transportation. And I hope to have you guys on future roundtables as we move forward. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and give you guys the rest of your day back and call it a roundtable. Thank you.